So we're going to jump into the running back winners from the NFL draft, and we're going to start off this first question. I don't know, this could be winners or losers depending on your perception, but we have Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. One lands with the Seattle Seahawks, one lands with the New York Jets. Are they winners still with that landing spot?
No. No, they're not. They're not because, like, in some cases, like, okay, so we'll get to like guys like Jahan Dotson and stuff, and I think there are some instances where it's hard to call someone a draft loser because we don't like the landing spot when they came with draft capital that maybe wasn't something that we could predict, but we knew that these guys were going to be second-round picks. The Walker and Breece Hall, there was really no question. It's a thin running back class. Like even the fact that Cook was a second-round pick was surprising, at least a little bit. So if you know you're getting the second-round draft capital and then the landing spots are pretty bad, like I don't like either landing spot for. I think the Seattle one's probably worse. It is worse, but the Breece Hall one is definitely disappointing because, you know, a lot of the allure with Breece Hall is that he has this profile that suggests he can do everything. He can be a 3-down guy. He can handle the load. But we're seeing that the team's philosophy matters a lot for that. You know, I wasn't the biggest Najee Harris guy, but, you know, that Pittsburgh Steelers philosophy, they're clearly down to just have one guy take all the snaps. And the Jets aren't that team. And I was reading The Athletic yesterday. Connor Hughes, the Jets beat writer there, was saying, you know, they're philosophically committed to a committee, and they're just going to have Michael Carter spelling Breece Hall. And we know Michael Carter is pretty good. He played a lot better than I thought he would last year, and he's a capable receiver. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't use both guys. And that hurts Breece Hall. And I think it kind of moves him into like RB2 territory. And like, I don't know, it feels like kind of like Joe Mixon or something, where he's probably still going to have a lot of dynasty value for a long time. He's probably still going to get drafted in like the second round of redraft leagues next year, but we're probably not going to want to take him. You know, so I just don't like the way it kind of turned out for Breece Hall. I definitely would not call him a winner of the draft.
Well, it's disappointing. And like you said, it does seem like the Jets are committed to that. I wonder just how long you can go with that when you've got that kind of talent. You know, these things are always easier to claim in retrospect when a very specific scenario works out the way that a specific scenario will. But it definitely seemed like the Colts were not planning to use Jonathan Taylor the way that has sort of grown into, because he's just so good. Now, the problem for Breece Hall is that in order to earn that, if that's not what your team is wanting to do, is you've got to be unbelievably good. So there are lots of other spots, like you're kind of saying, where he wouldn't have to do that. I mean, he could be Najee Harris, which, I mean, that's like a borderline starter.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think the thing with Hall that does worry me too is that, you know, if you look at like yards per route run, which is, I really like that, especially for running backs, because I think it kind of helps you understand the skill set and like the range of outcomes as far as the receiving stuff in a really nice way. Jonathan Taylor had the same college career yards per route run as Saquon Barkley. Like, he was not used that much as a receiver, but he was highly efficient. And we see exactly why now that he's in the NFL. Like, he's awesome on screen passes and stuff. Like, he's an explosive guy, and teams almost have to be blind if they don't start to realize, oh, we can use him in all facets of the game. Maybe not like, you know, a classic dump off guy, but, you know, he's got some real talent as a receiver. Breece Hall was more in kind of the Ezekiel Elliott range, more in the Cam Akers range, guys who like should be totally fine as receivers, but won't necessarily like dictate that they need to be on the field as receivers. So I do think that Breece Hall in some ways was like maybe a bit more landing spot dependent than even Jonathan Taylor.
Well, speaking of great receivers, Pat, the most important player, the key player to this entire draft now has become Rachaad White. Now that you've had a chance to digest his landing spot a little more, still excited that he went kind of at the beginning of the range we were looking for, a little bit worried because, like you said, the Buccaneers are a team that will just use one back. But unfortunately, that back is Leonard Fournette, and they've made sort of a renewed commitment to him from a contract perspective.
They have, yeah, and they can't really get out of it until after the 2023 season. So we're looking at 2 years of Leonard Fournette. I would expect that they do get out of it at that point, though, because Brady being there at the beginning of the 2024 season is like what, like a 0.5% chance. I mean, it's not, he won't be there. So, you know, Lenny won't be there, I don't think, longer than 2 years, but obviously the first 2 years of a running back are vital. So I'm still excited because the bet with Rachaad White, the whole reason to be interested in Rachaad White is that he's got decent size at 214 with this elite receiving profile. And with the Buccaneers this year, as long as he gets on the field in any way, really, he's going to get a chance to show what he can do as a receiver, because Tom Brady throws to his running backs no matter the down. It's not like he has to earn, you know, the third down role from Fournette for us to get a look at what he looks like as a receiver. And when you look at his receiving profile, it really is like a super high ceiling type of receiving profile. I've talked about the yards per out run. If you look at guys with yards per out run of 2.3 or better over the course of their college career, talking about drafted prospects, we're looking at Christian McCaffrey, Kenyon Drake, Alvin Kamara, Kenny Gainwell, and Joe Mixon, and Rachaad White. So now we've got third-round draft capital here, and we've got a quarterback who's going to let us see what he looks like as a receiver. We go into 2023, and maybe this is like a Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara situation. I don't mind if, you know, Leonard Fournette's there to bruise and bang. I think, you know, at 214 pounds, we're not looking at a guy who's ever going to be like an 80% snap guy. We need him to be, if he's going to be a running back one for fantasy, we need him to be the one in any committee who has the high value touches, you know, an Aaron Jones, an Alvin Kamara. That's the archetype we're looking at here. And I think he's going to get a chance to at least show us the type of talent that he is as a rookie. So I'm excited.
And like those guys, he can take a pass and go 30, 40 yards with it.
Yeah, he's athletic too. That's, I mean, it's all there. Like, this is the archetype.
So, Pat, in this roughly, say, 60 pick range, starting with White from 90 to 151, we get 9 backs going off the board, finishing with Allgeier. Should we be taking the order that these guys came off the board as providing any intel? Would you be looking at Allgeier and Dameon Pierce as perhaps the biggest winners in this area because of landing spot?
I would, yeah. I think that Allgeier and Pierce are probably the biggest winners, yeah. In terms of like the order, I don't know. I think when you get to like the like this sort of range of similar draft capital, I'd rather bet on the profiles. There's not like a huge gap. But I think you do also want to figure out like what's the path to them showing us how good they are. You know what I mean? Like in some ways, I think it's like production obviously is key, but like, let me actually even see who this guy is. Because, you know, I don't want him to get aired. I don't want him to get forgotten about. And I want to have as much information as possible to make decisions. So Pierce, it does feel like maybe he's getting a bit steamed above where I'm comfortable. He does not really jump out in terms of any of the statistical stuff that I'm looking at, but I kind of like him for some reason. He scores a lot of touchdowns, and I think like he kind of looks like he'll be like a good kind of early down guy. But Shawn, do you have any interest in Pierce after he lands in a clear opportunity?
No, but I do think you have to respect the fact that he went there and that, I mean, he's going to get to touch the ball a lot. And so the thing that was kind of cool for me on this is if it's a player that I'm not on, I love for them to go earlier and push guys down. And I love for my opponents to have a potential trap player. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always right on it. Sometimes those trap players actually end up being very viable fantasy assets for other people. But if they're going to have that, I prefer they have to pay more for it too. So that kind of either way, if they have to pay more, then it helps me out at least a little bit. You know, you were mentioning the touchdowns. I don't know how many goal line opportunities we're going to get there in Houston.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it'll be a lot less than he had last year. Allgeier is more interesting to me because he doesn't have like the athleticism we want ideally, but he has really good breakaway numbers and he's big. And so it's like kind of like day 3 Derrick Henry. I think I'm kind of in on that.
Pat, I don't know if you had any chance to run across this on our day 3 stream, but after we had Lynn Swan on Thursday night, I had to compare Allgeier to John Riggins.
Oh boy. Okay.
There was some interesting comps being dished out during the draft streams, but yeah, Riggins got a shout out there. After the likes of Pierce and Allgeier, there is some kind of smaller backs that will be going late and went later in the NFL draft, like Williams, Chandler, and Beatty. Have you any interest in those guys at all?
Yeah, I think like you get to a certain point, and I think that certain point is Thornton, and then you just draft running backs. That's kind of like where these drafts, you just have a really low hit rates on everyone. And so, trying to mine some early career production, or just a guy maybe you can flip. I think that running back, you have such a better chance of finding that. One guy who's kind of jumped out to me, and I like the guys you mentioned, but I haven't really heard anyone talk about it. Tristan Ebner. The 6th round pick for the Bears. David Montgomery's free agent after the year. David Montgomery's also at times, had Tariq Cohen, or they seemed interested in having Damian Williams kind of play a receiving back role there. So he could be kind of a receiver. He's like not tiny. I think he's like 204, decently explosive. I don't know. He intrigues me, but this does feel like a range to like just fall irrationally in love with some random guy who's never going to do anything, and I'm already starting that with Tristan Ebner.
Yeah, definitely a name now to anyone listening. Add that into your notebook for your drafts.